Today's show is sponsored by the 2019 season of Savage Race. Typically around this time of year, Savage sends me some new copy to read, and then I add my own, personal flair as I do for the host read, as they're called here in podcast land. But you know what? I'm going 1,000% MBD on this one because I love Savage Race. I've been running Savages since 2012. They know me by first name. They know my kids by first name. First of all, Savage takes the cake for the We Care Award. They put on great races, and you can feel that love, but also if there's ever been any issues, they always take care of it. They always take care of their customer. I just love how they do that. They continue to innovate. Every year they throw at least a couple new obstacles in there. They're super fun. I really love Savage Race. This year, they're up in the game on the Blitz. That's their new short course, so you can win the classic Savage distance race on Saturday, then the short course on Sunday to double up. Ladies and gentlemen, I love Savage Race. Please go check out their races. Everyone says, oh, they won't come to the West Coast. You know why? Because they're not idiots. They can't just move overnight across the country. It's expensive. We all know what happened to the last company that tried to do that. This could be the longest host read ever. I love Savage Race. Check out SavageRace.com.
Yeah! Get up!
Welcome to the Obstacle Racing Media Podcast with Matt B. Davis.
With over 300 episodes since 2012, Matt has produced the most consistent podcast in OCR.
Each episode, Matt speaks with race directors, athletes, and industry insiders to bring you the most in-depth interviews and conversations in the world of obstacle racing,
adventure runs, and ultra marathons. If you have small children nearby, now is the time to put on some headphones
or send them off to watch Phineas and Ferb, as there are occasionally four-letter words,
which are not bleeps. Now, here is your host.
Now here is your goddamn host.
Now here's your host, fucking Matt B. Davis.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Obstacle Racing Media Podcast. I am your host, Matt B. Davis. Welcome back to the show. Recording on a Monday. You're hearing this on a Tuesday if you're hearing it on day one, or whenever you're hearing it. I hope your weekend was good. Mine went very well. I put on a race twice a year called Run the ATL. If you haven't heard me talk about that before, you can look on the internet, runtheatl.com. We send people around the city in the summer. It's a 20-mile loop. In the winter, we mix it up. It's been a 14, a 15, a 16, different variations, but it's a really fun race. And it's interesting if you haven't heard me talk about it before, because when I talk to people what I do and they don't quite understand it, they all go, oh, well, do you put on the races? Do you put on an obstacle race? And I don't, and never thought I would. And then this thing got started. So if you want to know more about it, you can send me a message. I'll send you some links and we can talk about it. Or maybe I'll do a full-on Run the ATL episode one day. But that's what I did this weekend, and getting very excited for the first U.S. National Championship Series. I said that wrong. In Jacksonville, Florida. I will be down there. I'm going to be at all of the U.S. National Series this year, which I've never done. So excited about that. Excited about the content I'm going to bring you on the RM side, and dropping a little hint, a little on the Spartan side. More to come on that later. But super exciting because you know how I am. When I'm at these events, I get everything I can get. And I'm working on a bigger project that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But let's get to today's episode. On today's program, I like to do the lines, guys. I think they're good. I think people like familiarity, whatever that word is. I think people like familiarity. People like segments. People like names of things. Anyway, on today's program, Alex Hutchinson. Now, I met Alex because he was a speaker and participant in the 29029 event. 29029 is an event put on by Jesse Itzler and his team. We'll link that, of course, in the show notes, or show things as I'm calling them. Can't remember what I'm calling them right now. But you go up that thing, you take the gondola down, you go back up the thing again. 17 times total equals 29029, the equivalent of Everest. It's an endurance event. It's super great. And hey, it's an endurance event, which is why we've got an expert on endurance on today's show. So we talk a little bit about each other's experience at the event, and then I ask him a bunch of questions because I'm a curious cat, and that's what I do. And I liked this guy almost right away when he started speaking. I just liked his style. So I think you will too, and I think you'll enjoy it. And get ready, the OCR type stuff trust me, is coming fast and furious. If you only want to hear from OCR athletes and race directors, trust me, once we hit this season with the U.S. National Championship Series. But you know me, I like to dabble in other stuff. Alex Hutchinson. Away we go. You know, I got to be honest. One of the things this event taught me is what a cynic I am. Because, for example, I was like, great, they're going to have speakers. I'm sure they're going to be great. You know what I mean? And then, like, I got out a lot of all the speakers, right? Like,
I'll be honest, I'm the same. Even though I was one of the speakers, I roll my eyes at the motivational speaking gigs.
Right.
And I would. Are we recording now? I would say
yes, we're recording.
Okay. Well, then all the talks were amazing. Yeah, no, I actually just chatted with Colin O'Brady yesterday. I followed up with him because his story was really remarkable. And I honestly, I was prepared to be skeptical. Like, okay, you climbed the mountain, big whoop. But he was an interesting guy, and he had some interesting thoughts. And I had a chance to chat with him during the event and hear about what he's doing in Antarctica. And I was like, that's cool. I want to hear more about this, the way he's optimizing his food and stuff like that. So I'm going to write about him for Outside.
Well, how dare you? He's going to be my story. How dare you?
There'll be lots of stories on him.
No, I'm sure. Well, and honestly, like, I'm also this is what I've learned about I'm gonna say men. Okay, I think this holds true. We are at once like amazingly like dedicated, like can get stuff done, and also inherently lazy and want to just like be left the fuck alone, right? So I definitely fall into that category, and I am like, I don't know how much you interacted with me, but like people would call me like a people person. I'm doing air quotes for those listening at home. But I do sometimes get this very separate thing going on, right? So if there's a big room and a bunch of speakers, I'm going to go somewhere else and check out, right? But because I'm there on assignment, I'm like, well, I guess I have to listen to these speakers. I'll get a shake. So like, I really like quote unquote didn't want to be there. And then I really enjoyed all the stuff, not even because I expected to be inspired or not inspired, but just because they were very different. So, you know, I'm going to ask you to think about yourself or talk about yourself, which is weird, but like, you know, you're kind of a relatively, I would say, soft-spoken Canadian guy, yes?
Yeah, I like to think so. Yeah. I know I'm Canadian. I think I'm soft-spoken, yeah.
But you're not Jesse, right? You're not this dynamic, loud, you know, guy. But it makes I think your story, you know, a different kind of energy, and then like the jokes almost work better because sometimes it's one of these things where I'm not sure you know you're being funny. Is that an insult to say that to you?
No, that's good. That's the way it's supposed to come across. Although now I'm like, were there some things that I didn't intend to be funny where I was like, tears were rolling down my cheek and everyone was like, that guy's hilarious. I
mean, but like you get like, I don't know, like you must know, like, you know, I remember I specifically said like, hey, this talk has this different ending now because of the recent events. And I said, well, have you been preparing for that? And you're like, well, I kind of told it this way. But like, do you know where all the laughs are in your story, or are you pleasantly surprised sometimes? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say, so I've given sort of many variations on a similar core talk since my book came out in February. So I've had a lot of chances to see different audiences and how they react. And there are some reliable laugh lines, some of which are not the ones I expected. And some of the things that I think are funny tend to fall flat. And so I'm nothing if not responsive to what the people want. So I've dialed down the stuff that I thought was really funny and just tends to lie there. And I go back to the lines that people have laughed at, even though I'm like, actually, I didn't think that was, I wasn't expecting a laugh there. And then it's like, oh, people laugh at, well, I'll keep saying that. But it is, as you certainly know, every group of people is different and the vibe in every place is different. So there's always like, lines that I build up to or stories that I build up to that maybe don't resonate as well in one audience than another. And there's other places or other times when it's like I'm just trying to get through some information so I can set up the next bit, and then you can tell they're into it, either they're laughing or they're interested or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you can never predict because it's not just the people in the room, but it's also the room and the place. And I'm sure if you had heard me speak, in a classroom at university, you might have been in a very as unreceptive as you thought you were. You might have been 10 times more unreceptive in that environment. And I think people were, in that place where we were gathered together everyone preparing to do something that we all knew was going to be hard. I think probably it was more fertile ground for kind of hearing these messages that sometimes might sound a little, even to me, a little rah-rah or a little motivational. They're kind of what you're waiting for when, sometimes when in that environment, I think.
Well, but again, like your speech isn't rah-rah. Your talk is like informative, which sounds boring. So it's a better informative and entertaining. I think that's what I would say it was.
And I would say it's rah-rah in the way that I could be rah-rah, which is that I'm never saying the words raw or raw, but I'm giving a message that I think if you stop it, and I'm not even necessarily connecting the dots for people. I'm not saying if you follow this research, you're going to be able to perform X%, more effectively or anything. I'm just, as you say, my role, and I hope this comes across. I try and be informative. I just try and give information, but I think the dots are there to be connected. I'm giving that information because I think it will be useful and helpful, and maybe even rah-rah-ish when you're out there pushing your limits. So it's rah-rah in the sense that it provides the fuel for you to make your own motivation.
Yeah, I think that if the basic concept is you thought you could do X and you had no idea. Did I tell you the super basic thing that my friend did? Because he did a talk to students about, like, his talk was something like study less, make better grades in less time. Super basic, right? And whatever that talk was, like, one of the things he did was he asked people how high they could jump on the wall, like what spot can you touch? And then all he did was add $5. And then everybody jumps higher, right? I guess I didn't tell you.
That's awesome.
I guess I didn't tell you because you got a genuine reaction. But so, like, that's the base level, right? Maybe it was 20. But whatever it was, that he held the 20 5 inches higher, right? And they always got it. And so...
That's an expensive talk.
I'm sure he rolled that into his expenses. But yeah, and so that's always stuck with me. And your story, which I'm not going to make you recreate, and I'll do some lead in, by the way, because we're talking a lot and we're making a lot of assumptions here. But I'm the kind of guy that's like, I'm going to set it up in the intro and we'll kind of get to you. And if they have more questions, they can freaking buy your book or call me. But this basic concept of what one thinks they can do, and the short version is, you were on the wrong pacing time because someone gave you the wrong information, and so you ran the race of your life, where had they not given you that information, it may not have happened, right? Because you're tricking yourself, right? Yeah. And I guess I want to start asking you, what made you want to write this book? I mean, clearly, like, you're a guy who likes to write, but let's talk specifically about when the idea for the book came and what made you want to write it.
Aside from getting vastly rich and famous, you mean? I'm
guessing that printer behind you was that like a $25,000 printer?
Oh, it's studded in jewels. That's that's everything in my house is cost $25,000.
Right.
No, seriously. There wasn't like one epiphany. As just to not to tell you my whole life story here, but as I probably mentioned during the talk, I started out as a physicist for 10 years. I was running. I didn't know what I wanted to do. At one point, I took a year off in my mid-20s trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do, and didn't figure out, and so went back to physics. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I decided to start journalism. So I'm not a guy who was like from the age of 8 knew what I wanted to do and has been pursuing it. I'm a guy who's been trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do.
I kind of hate those people, by the way.
The people who know what they want to do?
Yeah, I knew that I would do this when I was 6. I was like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, congratulations to them. I'm a man of peace, so I wish them well, but I wasn't one of those guys. And so even when I started journalism, I wasn't necessarily thinking that I wanted to write a book. I mean, I thought it would be nice, but and eventually it was sort of a process of discovery. And I started out as a newspaper reporter, covering the car accidents and the dog fashion shows and stuff. And that made me want to be a freelancer. So then I was a freelancer, but even then I was like, I'm going to be a freelancer. I'm going to write about anything and everything. I didn't have any mission in life. And it just sort of drifted into, I had interest in science from my science background, and I had interest in endurance because of my running background. I started writing about the science of endurance. And even then I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to write a book, but the sort of turning point was probably about 10 years ago when I started stumbling into the research from Tim Noakes and others who were, you can, not to overstate it, but who were sort of sparking a revolution in the study of endurance, and starting to say, hey, we have to incorporate the brain right from the start. And that seemed to me, that was fresh to me, because suddenly something clicked and said, that fits with my own experiences of like, how come I'm an amazing racer one day and a terrible racer a week later? How come, I can't calculate. I don't know what my limits are until I get to that point. And that doesn't fit with the idea that it's just, your VO2 max and your lactate threshold, and you just calculate these things and that's what you're going to be. So I would say at that point, 10, 11 years ago, I thought this could be a great book, but I wasn't yet ready to do it. And so probably a couple years later, 2009 is the earliest email I can find where I was emailing someone. In fact, I was emailing Tim Noakes saying, I'm writing a book on the limits of endurance. I want to come to South Africa and hang out in your lab and learn about what you do. And so that's a long time ago. But in theory, I would have thought the book would be out by 2011 or 2012. But the deeper I dug, the more there was to discover, and I just never felt ready until a few years ago. I was like, well, I'm never going to be ready, so I just need to write the book. But anyway, that's the long version of the story. I once I discovered the brain-centered, the brain-related work by like Tim Noakes and others, I had this idea. I had this feeling that this hadn't really been explained well to a general audience, and that maybe I could be the guy who could do it.
Yeah. So something I said to you in person about what makes someone better at endurance is this concept of the suffering, and not just sort of enduring through the suffering, but enjoying the suffering. And so I mentioned like maybe someone like Amelia Boone, who my listeners are familiar with, actually enjoy it. And so because they have that, being on the mountain where everything hurts, or, being lost in the woods at Barkley is like, well, this is great. Bring it on. That great scene from Forrest Gump, right? And the rest of us, it's like, it's almost like, is it like being born with brown hair? Like you actually enjoy it and I don't. You like the taste of pepperoni pizza and I don't. You know what I'm saying?
You don't like pepperoni? Crazy.
If there was a human out there that didn't, they can't help that they were born with that.
Yeah.
Like, is there a gene that people have that clicks on when the going gets tough? Not only do they survive, but they thrive.
First of all, I'm amazing you can remember conversations from that weekend in Vermont, because all I remember is this sort of endless abyss of well, not suffering, but of hard effort. But in terms of the enjoyment of suffering thing, I would say there's not a ton of science there, but I've been to a couple of conferences where different speakers have brought up the idea of what they called benign masochism, that some people are just wired to enjoy a certain type of suffering, and there's a lot of caveats there that, you hope the suffering is relatively self-inflicted and under your control, and you're choosing the terms, but people just get a kick out of not just pushing their limits, but pushing to the point of discomfort or pain. I think there's probably some truth to that, but it's interesting because, of course, nobody can get inside somebody else's head. So it's like, when you say someone enjoys suffering, is it that they're enjoying the discomfort, or is that their response to the suffering triggers brain chemicals that their response to the challenge or the physical situation triggers, whatever it is, dopamine and their fight or flight response, and so they're getting the sort of the analog of runner's high or something. So it's not that they're enjoying the suffering; they're enjoying the good feeling they get when they're pushed to their limits. Maybe that's saying the same thing, but I guess I'm just saying that it may be that to them it's not that they're enjoying suffering; it's that it's actually a good feeling, and so they're enjoying pleasure.
Yeah, and I feel like it's all about, like, I just use this word, like tricking the mind, again, from your experience, right, of not knowing how fast you're going, or that woman who you mentioned, who I'd heard her story but didn't know her name, who had the accident, and so she has no idea how long she's been running. What's her name?
Diane Van Daren.
Right. So I had read that or heard that, and so she's this great ultra runner, and it's like, again, it's like she has this self-inflicted sort of trick on her own mind. Put it in a 29:029 context. When they put that red bib on me, I swear to God, I got lighter, like my whole body, right? So then someone was like, well, could you have done one more? It was only 2:00. You had 5 more hours. I'm like, I guess I could have, but the feeling that comes from doing that last one feels so good. Like, why would I possibly want to do one more? Like, just to prove that I could? Because the come down is so crazy, right?
Totally. Yeah. And just to pick up on that point, like, I guess the one reason I'll push back against the idea of the benign masochism, the enjoying suffering, I think there's probably something to it, but I think that makes it sound a little bit too fixed, that some people have it and some people don't. And I think we may start at different places. We may have different inclinations, but I think everyone can move within that spectrum, can acquire mental habits as well as physical fitness that makes discomfort more comfortable. That if you learn to reframe what you're experiencing, so that the physical signals that you're experiencing from your body, are you interpreting them as a sign that you're about to lose a limb, or that you're in deep trouble, or are you interpreting them as just information about your pacing, like the readout of your dashboard? And I think the more experience you get pushing your limits, the more you're able to hear the signals from your body just as information rather than as a reason to panic. And I think that makes the whole experience more pleasurable. And so, sure, some people start out at a with a yearning for pain that most of us may never achieve. But I don't think it's necessarily right to just sort of see it as it's a gene that you've got or you don't. Because I think it's something that also depends on our psychological skills in a way.
So what was your frame of mind starting that first lap?
So, look, I in a sense, I don't mean to puff myself up here, but I could conceivably think of myself as a quote unquote expert on endurance, who knows all about pacing, who knows all about marshaling your resources and spreading your energy well. So I was very cognizant of the need not to go out too fast, that it's going to be a long day or weekend, that I'm just going to, keep it under control and be patient and know that the victory is in the persistence, not in like winning the start. So with all that in my mind, I went out way too fast for the first 3 laps, and I absolutely exploded partway through the 4th lap. And by the 5th lap, I was going 50% slower than the first lap.
What was, just for context, so what was your time on the first lap?
So my first 3 laps, I did right around 30 minutes flat for the uphill.
So just to give people context, that's really fast.
So it was too fast.
like most people were between like 45 and an hour, right, on the way up.
Yeah.
Some people were obviously far slower, but 30 is cooking.
So yeah, I think it's. I didn't actually check the sort of very fastest times, but I don't think anybody sustained that pace for the entire time. And I think maybe last year in better conditions, the fastest time was somewhere around that threshold. But it was too fast, and that's partly getting back to your question of what was my mindset, or what my mindset maybe should have been, is that this is a very unfamiliar task to me and to almost everybody, except for those people who had done it once before, which is you go up a pretty steep slope under muddy conditions for whatever it is, 30 minutes to an hour, and then you take a 15-minute break on the gondola down, and you repeat that 17 times. So your sense of, is this sustainable, gets warped by those frequent breaks on the gondola. And so because of the gondola, I was never in cardiovascular trouble. I was never like breathing unsustainably hard or anything like that. It felt easy. What I didn't take into account was that, independent of the gondola, the effort of going up the steep and muddy section in the second half of the hill, it takes it out of your legs, and it's my legs that hit that kind of reached the point where they're like, Alex, you can't. I was going anaerobic in a sense. My legs were feeling like they were full of lactate, and it's like, that's a bad feeling when you get that 4 laps into a 17-lap race, and you think, wow, this is the feeling I wanted to experience, like sprinting down the final straightaway to finish, not four times through. So rewinding, my feeling at the start of the race was uncertainty, caution, like heading into the unknown and not knowing how I was going to respond to this. And despite that, I did all the things that I sort of feared I might do, which was to totally underestimate the magnitude of the challenge.
So what did you adjust after lap 4 or 5?
So in lap 4, I really felt it. I didn't slow down much in lap 4. I think I was still like 32 minutes or something, but I felt it and I realized this is not sustainable. And so lap 5, I basically, the obvious thing I adjusted is my pace. But what I tried to then do is switch over to saying, as I go up this hill, I should not be in any immediate distress. I should not be pushing to the point where I'm like, wow, my legs are starting to get tired. It should feel sustainable, like easy the whole way. And even though it feels easy the whole way, it's not going to, that doesn't mean it's easy because you're going to do it over and over again. But, I tried to turn off my very, a relatively powerful competitive instinct. And so what I found kept happening, especially as the day wore on, where there's just always people on the hill that you're not like alone. And it's in a lot of places, the best footing is a single file path and it's muddy everywhere. And so it's big, deep grass. So it's not convenient to go around people. And so you come up behind someone if you're going faster than them, and you sort of wait for a moment when it's convenient to get past them. And then you whip around them, you go past them. And at that point, you don't want to then slow back down. It's like, on the highway, if you pass a car and then hit the brakes and force them to slow down, you don't want to be that jerk who's like, all right, I whipped around you. Now I'm going to slow down. And yet there's no place to like, you don't necessarily want to pull off. Or I was trying to go continuous. I wasn't taking breaks on the hill. So then it's like, well, now I have to keep going at least as fast as this guy I just passed. And I should put a little gap on them. So I should speed up a little bit. So I would end up gradually accelerating and then because I was accelerating, I would catch someone else and I would pass them. And I would think, well, okay, I better accelerate. So I'm going to pass, and then I'd pass someone. Anyway, all of which just to say, I kept getting sucked into going faster than I intended to.
Your theory is super flawed.
My theory is flawed. I should have just rested or what?
Well, like I would pass people and it was always like, okay, try to make a connection, right? Because maybe they're hurting or maybe they're not, but like try to make a connection. Hey, how's it going? You know what I mean? Whatever, what number, how you doing, blah, blah. And then I would just keep going the same pace because I'm going faster than them. I feel no need to put on the gas because I'm already going faster than them.
You're talking about the theory, and the theory is good. I agree with the theory. In practice, subconsciously, I think I would just find myself
right. That's what I'm saying. Your theory is super. Your theory is super flawed. That you're worried about. You're worried.
Yeah, no. It was an error. And so, getting back to what your question was, what did I change? That's what I tried to change. I realized that was happening, and I told myself, Alex, that's stupid. You're making this harder for yourself. Other people don't care if you slow down. If you you should be going And so I tried to tune back into the go as fast as your legs want you to go, not as fast as you feel you need to go to avoid looking silly for passing someone and then slowing down. And so I was able to do, I just my nature is such that was always a bit of a driver. And every time I stopped sort of thinking about it, I would find myself looking ahead, catching someone, passing them, accelerating a bit. This happens to me on the highway too. It's like I'll be like, I'm speaking in kilometers per hour here, but I'll be like, I want to drive 110. And then someone will be kind of going in an inconsistent speed. So I'll be like, I need to pass them and I want to pass them quickly. So I'll go up to 115. And then because I'm going 115, I'll catch someone else and I'll say, well, I'll just pass them. And then I have to go 117. And all of a sudden I'm going way faster than I intended to. And so, look, it's a character flaw or a cognitive distortion or whatever the case may be. But it's important to recognize those things in yourself because we all have things that where we're behaving in ways that we wouldn't actually endorse consciously.
No, of course. I mean, I went out much faster than I thought. First of all, I put myself in the front, which I didn't mean to, right? I know from experience, don't go out in the front. But I just, the speech happened and then we were off and I was in the front. And I looked back and I was like, oh my God, I'm in front. And I was in, I intentionally did not look at my watch until I was finished. And I assumed it had been close to an hour and it was 42 minutes and I was in the gondola and I didn't even know who I got into the gondola with. We were just talking. And then as we got down a little bit and the light came in, there was Colin. And I thought, I'm doing pretty good. I'm with Colin. I would later find out that he was totally slumming it the first few laps and maybe the whole race. He wasn't going to kill himself. But it's still like, it was, again, kind of like your story, like, oh, cool. Like, here I am with this guy. He's really good at climbing. But in my mind, because an hour up plus 15, that's where I was like, oh, this is going to take me forever. But if I'm doing in Gunson, as my dad would say, if I'm doing it an hour total, climb up plus the ride down, this is great. I'll have 12 climbs by 6 p.m., right? Or at least thereabouts, right? So I was thrilled to be at that pace. And it started to, the ones that hurt for me, I think, and were the same for a lot of people, was like 6, 7, and 8. That's where I found myself turning around a lot and just sort of resting, right? Like there were a couple of little tiny peaks that were like the worst ones, right? But then I did that leg compression thing and it changed everything. Did you ever do that? The Norman Tech legs?
I didn't do it, but I did do after my 6th or 7th. I think I did I stopped for tacos and took 20 minutes. Like I was going continuously the whole time, except for I took 20 minutes for lunch and about must have been 30 minutes for dinner. And those were both like, given that you're taking 15 minutes for the gondola every time anyway, you're just like, well, what's another 20 minutes going to do? And it did everything. Like there were total resets for me because I was the same as you. I had like the 5th, 6th, and 7th were the ones, the hardest bar none for me because I was still so far from the finish and I'd started out fast and I was a little worried. But after that lunch break, then I settled into my new rhythm and it was like, all right, I can do this.
Yeah. So I had 2 like brand new guys in my tent, like guys who had never done anything. I mean, the thing is like none of us, unless you're a climber, have done this. And people would always say that and they'd be like, and I'm like, I've never held ski poles in my life. Like I've never even downhill skied. So it was new for everybody. But
I've got tendonitis in my wrist from those poles.
But if you've done an ultra or 2 or you've done some overnight events, you do have like some like immunity, I think, built up, especially mentally. So they were like, I was like, don't stop for lunch, don't stop for dinner, don't sleep. Like that's like, just get through it. This is what I told people. Because that was my plan, right? And I'm glad that I didn't stop for lunch or dinner, but I also wasn't going to stop to do the leg thing. I'm like, people were talking about it and I was like, that's so dumb. You're never going to want to get going. It's not going to help that. Like, and then somebody said, like, you could tell they were super bright and chipper and they were like, it's such a game changer. I'm like, fine, I'll do it. So I got on the legs thing. I had to have somebody show me how to put them on and turn it on because I'd never done it. And I leaned the thing back. I fell asleep for 20 minutes. I got those off and I was a new person, right? Yeah. So looking back, I did it like almost perfectly, like how I would tell someone to do it, because I did 1 through 8. Then I did the leg thing. So then I did 8 to 12 at night. I was still off the mountain by 10:30 at night. I got a full night's sleep and I did 5 the next day. Like it kind of worked. I didn't know that. Like in my mind, when I went to bed at 10:30, I was like, well, I'm going to sleep a few hours and then get up and knock this out, right? Because I don't want to, but I set my alarm, I think, for 4:30 and it went off and I was like, I'm going back to sleep. And I woke up at 7, ate some breakfast, got up, knocked out 5. It was like I said, like almost perfect way to do it.
Yeah. And with the benefit of hindsight, we both, I think, stumbled into good routines. I guess the question is, if we were to do it again next year, would those routines work, setting out to do it, or would we discover that those days our body wanted something different? Because it is interesting that I mean, maybe the best way to do it is to do what we both did, in the sense of listen to what we need and, make those decisions. Don't be too rigid in your expectations of what you want, because if you can keep going, if you're feeling okay, maybe that's the time to keep going and that'll be optimal. If you're starting to feel like I certainly did, like you'd really screwed up the early pacing, then a reset, I think, ended up being perfect. But you don't necessarily know that in advance. So you have to be willing to be flexible.
Right. Well, when I got to 11, I thought, man, 12 sounds great. Like go to bed with 12, wake up with 5 to go. And in my mind, whenever you start a lap, you're already like almost done. So 5 to go is really 4 to go, right? And when I got to 12, I was like, 13 sounds really good. And kind of like to your thing, like this is never going to stop if I keep doing this, right? So could I have physically pushed through? Yes. Would have my body been trashed and then Saturday was just like laying around and feeling shitty? Like, you know what I mean? So I'm really glad I did it the way I did it, because guess what? It turned out to be really pretty. Now, if it was pouring like it was when we got there on Thursday, right, it would have been a much more miserable experience. But when you got halfway off the mountain, it's snowing, it's beautiful. If you're dressed warm, it was kind of nice.
Yeah. When the snow starts, so I think I saw the first snow I actually stayed up I was out till about midnight on Friday, and it started snowing in my second last lap. And I was like, yeah, like, hey, this is pretty nice, and snow is a billion times better than rain at that temperature. So it's, there were some pretty special moments to be up there, like in the dark. Jesse, before we started, had said, make sure you do at least one night lap. And, he was right. It was that added an element to it that I think was pretty cool.
Yeah, but again, the other thing for me, the reason I was able to do what I did and not break so much is because I have in the past DNF'd races, because I did that wacky math where you think, I can do this and I can do this. Forgetting, by the way, you're going to be in worse condition later, right? So having failed many times other events and then learned from those and started to succeed at events, like, I can't teach that to someone. So maybe this event was that for them, and they go, you know what, next time I'm not gonna have that dinner break, or I'm not gonna sleep as much, or whatever it is. But since I've done a few of those and come out the other side, I knew what I needed to do to get ahead of the clock. So Saturday was not an easy day, but like a fun, light day. I'm in the snow. I got 5 laps to do. I'm chatting with people. It's daytime. It's not this nighttime alone suffering.
Yeah, and I have to say, so I finished at midnight, and it was cool. I was glad I did it the way I did it, but it was not the experience I would have got had I finished at 10 o'clock the next morning or something like that. It was my last lap. I saw 3 people from start to finish, and when I say I saw them, I saw a headlamp. I passed them. I kept going, and so. And then I got to the top, and that was it. And I went back down. And it was the low point of the night, like right around midnight. There was almost nobody on the hill.
But you had an X hour drive home, and you wanted to get home, right?
Yeah. So the context is so for me, the optimization problem wasn't just how can I finish this without feeling dead. It was, as you say, I had an 8-hour drive home. I've been traveling. So I was in the middle, and I'm still in the middle of a stretch where I'm away for 5 consecutive weeks, like for most of the week for 5 consecutive weeks. Like I just got back from Calgary yesterday, and I'm going to Phoenix in 2 days. And so I have 2 kids, ages 2 and 4. My wife works or is a medical resident, so works long hours. So all of which is to say, woe is me. We have a lot of childcare stresses. So for me, the prospect of being able to get home Saturday was a huge driver, even though I knew I would miss part of the experience, that the sort of basking and the party and everything like that. All of which, I'm not a super social guy, if truth be told, but those moments are pretty special, getting to celebrate with people who've all come through the same kind of ordeal. So I regret that, but that's why I finished at midnight. Otherwise, 10 o'clock, I would have been in bed and chilling, right, and enjoying the dinner too.
Right. If we were in Norway and you weren't a few hours away from home, right, it made it totally different. And I saw you saying goodbye to Colin, and I was going to walk over to say, hey, I'll reach out to you later, but I just let you go. But yeah, that makes it a totally different experience, because again, and that's like, you never know what's going on in someone's, world. I'm not a party guy either. Like, I went to bed like way before many people. Like, I don't even drink, so I probably went to bed at like 10:30 because I had to get up. I had to be in Albany at 6 a.m. for a flight, right?
Oh, that's early.
I know, dude. It was that part I regret. Again, I wanted to get home, and I think there's either a 6 a.m. and a 6 p. So if I wanted to get home, that was the way to go. But it was not good. Like, I was driving like this, like smacking myself. In that hour and a half drive to Albany in the morning was not pleasant. It was like when I got to the thing and the lady was like, you didn't put gas in it. Do you want to go back and get gas? I'm like, no, like I'll just pay the money. You know what I mean? Like, I was just so, right.
No, totally. And even if this was like a little bit farther, if I'd had a flight, everything would have been locked in. But because I had the freedom to get home earlier, I felt obligated to do that. And, in a perfect world, I would plan things such that I don't leave myself the freedom to do that, because it would have been a lot of fun to enjoy that last part of the event. But there's life is full of trade-offs, and that was one that worked out. And I guess if I want to look on the bright side, it was fun to have that pressure to think, because as as you know, this was not a competitive event. This was not like no placing, no one cares what place you finished, and so the pressure was to finish. And saying this without wanting to sound obnoxious, I was pretty confident I could finish. So one possibility would have been that I just paced myself to finish comfortably, and I would have pushed myself a lot less physically that way, and which is okay. But it was almost I don't regret having had a sort of secondary goal of maybe I could finish this before midnight, maybe I could finish this in one day, because it kept my sort of finger in the flame, and it kept me going. And I came there to be challenged, right? Like that's my fundamentally, and I think this is true of all these sorts of events. My goal wasn't to like win the event or finish the event. My goal was to challenge myself. You go there to be pushed out of your comfort zone, and because I'm because I'm a very fit runner. Finishing that event would have been challenging under any circumstances, but I was able to push myself and do something that I wasn't sure I'd be able to do, which was finishing by midnight. So that's the bright side. I missed the party, but I gained self-knowledge in doing something that I wasn't sure I could do. So
and I would say the cheat meals that they gave us was pretty amazing. Like, the food was great, but then it was like the hey, we don't care about health now. You can eat whatever you want. So it was mac and cheese. It was pizza. It was things stuffed with bacon. Like, that was totally like that. And it's just one of those things that's like, oh, this event has already treated me great, and now it's this icing on the cake. And so how about that sort of portion for you? Like, did the event, meet expectations, beyond expectations for the overall event, even though like part of it is speakers and you're one of them?
Yeah. So I thought the speaking was amazing, especially my talk. It was worth the drive just to hear myself talk. That was the highlight. No, I thought it was cool. I thought things went really well. So the food, you mentioned the food, and that was an interesting one for me because look, let's be honest, whatever you're going to be trying to eat during like an 18-hour ordeal is going to get old pretty fast. And there's a real risk of, GI upset or just like eating fatigue where you can't get in the calories you want because you never want to eat again. And I had talked to Mark, the organizer, before about what was available. And he was like, don't worry, it's not just going to be like goo and Gatorade at the aid stations. We're going to have this wide array of like real food. And I will say they had a wide array of food at the aid stations, but I wouldn't necessarily call it real food. So it was what I found. And I tried a bunch of different things, but I got tired of the options pretty quickly. And I was eating some of those. It had some pretty nice like bars, not really bars, or like sort of brownie kind of, can't remember what they were called, go-go or something. They weighed like 18 pounds and they sat like a brick in my stomach.
Yeah. But how do you not know to not eat those?
Yeah, well,
I took a bite and was like, this thing is cardboard, forget it.
But I was very worried about keeping up my caloric intake because I know that hunger cues are not sufficient. And I also didn't want to just rely on sugar. Like, I mean, I was eating, every time I drank, I was drinking like 1/4 Gatorade, say, and 3/4 water.
Dude, I must be a genius. That's what I was doing. I would knock back 1 or 2 Gatorades, then I would knock back 1 or 2 waters. I did a little pickle juice. Now, I know pickle juice helps with cramping. I don't know if it worked, but it was a placebo for me if it wasn't. But did just taking a couple hits help you? Because I did it on a few of the laps. Or is it not really doing anything?
The pickle juice is mostly where the research is if you feel yourself cramping, it can disrupt the cramp. And
it's not going to prevent the cramp.
There's no research suggesting that to my knowledge, but it's not impossible. It may be that because there may be a cramp coming on before you feel it, and by taking the pickle juice, you prevent it.
I want to say for me, I was a bit of a hoarder with food.
That's where all the bananas went, you bastard.
Well, what I would do is I would take, like, you've got it for the gondola ride down, right? But I don't know if you struggle with this, but I'm also there on a job. Right. So I'm interviewing people. I'm doing I recorded myself on the phone to use for writing and for podcast later, which I think is going to be really cool when you go back and listen to it. I hope you do. Because I talk to people in the gondola and I talk to myself in the gondola. Nice. This is what lap I'm on. This is how I feel. So I'm like eating, but then I put things in my pockets because God forbid I'm on the mountain and I'm hungry, even though it was never more than the bottom, middle, and the top away. I always was like every few laps then re-emptying my pocket. I'm like, okay, I didn't eat this. I didn't eat this. I'm like you. I need real food, right? I've learned from ultras, like at some point I need a fucking hamburger. I can't just eat goos and gels, right? But yeah, it's kind of the same crackers and pretzels and whatever. But what saved me was the ramen. Right when I needed something not tiny, the ramen to me was like a meal. And so I had that like every other lap, I think, between laps like 10 and the finish. And it was like a lifesaver.
So I screwed up. I heard about the ramen later. I didn't even know it was there until basically I was almost done. And I also, same with the sandwiches at lunch at the aid station at the top. People were like, those sandwiches were amazing. And I was like, what sandwiches? Because like just one aid station, I think I blew through the top aid station to go down and have lunch. And that must have been the one where they had sandwiches. So for me, going into the dining hall and make your own tacos for lunch, and then
I'm glad I didn't hear that it was tacos, because I would have stopped, and I'm glad I didn't.
It was amazing. It was like, yeah, and you know, it's all about context, and so I can say that in the context, those were the best tacos in the history of humanity.
Oh, dude, and a Coke is the greatest Coke in the world at mile 50 of 100 miler. You know what I mean?
Totally. So I was those tacos. They didn't just like they settled my stomach. Like I was like, okay, now I know I have some food in my stomach, so I don't need to worry so much about fueling. My stomach no longer feels upset. My mouth no longer feels like someone's pouring turpentine down it, which is what I get after I drink too much Gatorade. So that was good. And then they had like a pasta bar in the evening. The only downside was that it took a little, I had to wait a little while to get the pasta because they're like, you pick all the things you want. They stir fry it up, mix the pasta, put the sauce you want on. Like, it was gourmet food, and it was food that was like, tastes good. It sat easily for me. And it really, refortified me to be able to look those aid stations in the eye without crying, because then it's like, okay, I can stomach one of these pucks again because I just had a real meal.
But you know what I hear you can do? I hear you can just swish the Gatorade into your mouth and it tricks your brain.
That's right. As long as I did that in a race once, and I realized I'm not very good at spitting. So it's like, man, I have Gatorade all down my shirt now. This is So you can trick your mind, but the one key thing is you can't trick it forever. And when you're out there for like 18 hours, right, that trickery gets exposed pretty fast.
Well, here's the thing I told Mark. I said I hate to nitpick because everything about the event is great. But one thing about those sandwiches is the bread was like this, right? And so that's too much, right? It's like, and again, I think that's just what the place had. What the mountain had. I said just a regular sandwich bread. So basically, I think I ate one. And then hours later, I still wanted food, but on the ride down, I just ate the meat off the meat and the cheese, and that was very filling. But I wasn't going to tackle, this. I'm putting my hands very far apart.
Every part of your body is tired, so you don't want to waste jaw energy trying to chew through this massive thing.
Well, by the way, here's the other thing about day 2. Do you got to get going?
No.
Okay, good. Here's the other thing about day 2 that again I can't really explain, but I was so hyper conscious of everything I put in my stomach on day 1. Because I don't want to have any issues. On day 2, it's like, I only have a few more to go. So like I kind of ate everything, right? And you're just not as concerned. And like the end is, you just see the end already. And so I was willing to like not take chances, because I don't think I even ate anything different. I just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And I think here's the thing here to me. And again, I'm no expert. I've done a handful of endurance events. Again, I just did air quotes. I'm no expert. But to me, there's kind of like, like 3 big things. So one is your mindset, right? Just like where you are in general. But then the 2 things is your stomach and your feet, right? And either one of those things can go completely fucking sideways for the best athlete or the most average person. If your stomach goes on you, like, what are you going to do, man? Right? If you're either throwing up or shitting, sorry, like it just makes for a much more miserable event. So you kind of just, for me, that's a roll of the dice. Like, let's hope my feet stay good and just general kind of body stuff. And then let's hope my stomach holds out, because there's times that it has and there's times that it hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who went to the Olympics. Actually, went to a couple of Olympics as a marathoner, and the time he qualified for the Olympics, it was by the hair of his chin, because he had to stop and take a crap at mile 22. So he's in the porta potty, and it's like, this is a professional marathoner whose livelihood his lifetime dream is on the razor's edge here. He's trying to hit the qualifying time, and he had to pop into a porta potty. He did it pretty fast, but I was watching. People were watching on the race broadcast, and they're like, "Where did he go? He was with the leaders. Now he's gone." And then they had a live hit with his coach a little later. He's like, oh yeah, Reed had to stop and take a crap. So yeah, it happens to the best of us.
I can't remember everybody's accolades. Are you an Olympian or Olympian trials?
I'm not. I was a wannabe Olympian. I raced at the Canadian Olympic trials a couple of times, but I was about a couple notches below. Like I can't even say it was like I should have been there, but I slipped on a banana peel. It's like, no, I wasn't quite good enough.
And tell everybody what your distance was?
I was a miler, so I ran 1,500 meters in 3:42. And if you look up my exact time on the official IAAF equivalence tables, that equates to a mile in 4 minutes 0 seconds 0.02 seconds. So 200th of a second over a 4-minute mile is roughly where my abilities lay, which just doesn't frustrate me at all.
So you've never run sub 4?
No. So, the whole in Europe and most places around the world, they don't run the mile. They run the mile very infrequently, and they run the 1,500. So in my career, which was reasonably long, I only raced a mile outdoors once in my life in Eugene, Oregon, and I wasn't in top shape. I ran 4:06 or something like that. Look, if you can put me on the stand, then I will swear that on the day when I ran my best 1,500, I would have run a sub 4-minute mile. But I did not get that opportunity. What do you run these days? What do you like to do? I do a lot of 5Ks, or not a lot. I do some 5Ks, 8Ks. I'm going to run cross country, Masters cross country this year. Later this month, there's the Canadian National Masters Cross Country Championships I'm going to run. So that's 8K over hill and dale. Lately, I've been doing some other sort of more fun adventure type races. There's one that I'll do next month, which is in three person teams, and it's sort of an adventure orienteering race through the woods where you all have to your 3-person team has to stick together and you have to navigate, and it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 hours depending on how many navigational screw ups you make. So we're the guys I do it with, we're all pretty good runners and pretty terrible navigators. So that makes it sort of fun. Should have one guy that's the navigator, right? We did that one year, and we made the mistake. We, much like I did in 29:29, we went out way too fast. It was comfortable for the 2 runners on the team, but for the navigator, we basically blew out his legs pretty badly. And so halfway through the race, he's like, "Okay, guys, it's time." And he takes out some surgical tubing and clips it to the front of his backpack straps into the back of my friend's backpack, so we could tow him for the rest of the race. So every time he's off, as we were running, every time his feet are off the ground, he's getting pulled forward by this rubber tubing. Right. I'm guessing you don't know a heck of a lot about the obstacle racing world, but do you know who Ryan Atkins is? I've heard the name. I don't know much about him though. So he and his wife Lindsay happen to both be the best in the world right now, or almost the best in the world. This guy John Albin. Do you know John Albin? No, don't know him. So John has just won the Skyrunning World Championships. Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. And he also wins most of the big obstacle races. But unlike Ryan and Lizzie and a lot of these people that sort of race week in, week out, he kind of only shows up. I always say he's like, when they say about a receiver, he just catches touchdowns. This guy, John Alden, just shows up and wins the best races in the world. But the thing about Ryan that is so fascinating to me is that, Ryan is this amazing runner, and he has like the upper body of kind of like an Adonis. And so like you wonder how he's so fast because it's so impressive. Like he might lose to you in a 5K, but he might not, you know what I'm saying? Depending on the day. Yeah. And I don't know if you're ever looking to do, stories for outside or whatever. I know Amelia's gotten a lot of press. This guy, Ryan, and his wife, because she wins a ton of stuff too. I don't know. They're Canadian. They're really sweet. They win a lot of races. I'd love to make an introduction. They're kind of amazing. Cool. That's good to know. Yeah. I'll keep that in mind. And, it's, I guess it's a world that I don't know a lot about. So it's not a lot, I don't know a lot about. So it's cool to hear that there's some Canadians, kicking ass. It turns out they're kind of the best at it right now. I mean, I could tell you offline, there's a bunch of them who are really good. It makes us, the Americans, like, come on, man, like we gotta, because they've been winning for a while, like the last couple of years. Nice. Yeah, man, you guys are good. Well, it's the tough northern environment that maybe that's it. They're chopping wood to stay warm. Exactly. What would you like to plug besides your book? Do you have sponsors? Do you have websites or social profiles you want to plug? I mean, I guess if you're interested in the science of endurance, my Twitter feed is Sweat Science, and that's where I post all my, every time I write an article or if I see other articles that seem interesting to me. So yeah, if anyone's interested in finding out more, Sweat Science is probably the place to go.
But that's not your Instagram handle.
I do not have Instagram at this point, which I've been told is a huge mistake, and that I'm hanging out with the elderly aunts and so on Facebook. My problem is I'm not a super visual guy. I don't take a lot of pictures. I know I could change that. I could start taking pictures, but the problem is I spend a lot of time sitting in this room here. So a lot of the pictures would be me in my pajamas sitting in front of the computer, which I think doesn't portray the active outdoor lifestyle image that I'm trying to convey.
There was Alex. Thanks so much. I included links to his website and his book, or his latest book, where you can check that out. If you want to support this program, there are a few ways to do it. First of all, Patreon, as we've talked about a lot, patreon.com. For a couple of dollars a month, you support content creators like myself. Many are doing it, and it's the greatest thing. But also, not sure why I didn't say this sooner, but if you go to Obstacle Racing Media and you click Support ORM, there's a Spartan link you can click. So any Spartan race you register, we get a couple bucks. And then an Amazon link. And it's not just for OCR stuff. Whatever you buy on Amazon, once you click that once, you're cookied for a day or two or a week. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's a way to help us. So go to the link that's Support ORM on the website, from your phone, from your website, and it's a way for you to support the show. As a reminder, we do brand new episodes every Tuesday, interview-style programs, and then every Thursday, we do Obstacle Discourse with Davis and Chase, a somewhere between 15 and 30-minute chat, Josh, Chase, and I, with the news of the week. Love you, miss you, mean it. Stay warm, everybody. I have got to run.